Have you ever noticed that the people who disturb your peace the most are often the ones who seem to demand the most of your attention? They provoke, criticize, manipulate, and pull you into conflicts you never intended to have. Before you realize it, your thoughts revolve around them, your emotions belong to them, and your energy is no longer your own. The greatest victory for a toxic person is not making you angry. It is making you forget yourself. Many people believe that strength means fighting back, proving a point, or making sure the other person understands they were wrong. But life teaches a very different lesson. The strongest mind is not the one that wins every argument. It is the one that refuses to become imprisoned by unnecessary battles. Every moment you spend reacting without awareness is a moment you surrender your inner freedom. There is a quiet intelligence that cannot be learned through force. It comes from understanding people as they are, rather than as you wish them to be. Toxic behavior is often predictable. It feeds on emotional reactions, on attention, on resistance. When you understand this pattern, you stop playing a game that was designed for you to lose. Instead of asking, how do I change this person? You begin asking, how do I protect my peace without losing my humanity? Today, we will explore the smartest way to deal with toxic people. Not through revenge, avoidance born from fear, or endless confrontation, but through clarity, discipline, and emotional mastery. Because true freedom begins the moment you realize that your greatest responsibility is not to control another person's behavior, but to govern your own mind. And once you learn this, no toxic person will ever have the power to decide how you feel or who you become. One of the greatest misunderstandings about toxic people is believing that they are powerful because of what they say or do. In reality, their influence does not come from their words alone. It comes from your reaction to those words. A person can throw insults into the air all day long, but if no one catches them, they eventually fall to the ground. The moment you catch them, examine them, carry them, and replay them in your mind, they become heavier than they ever needed to be. This is why the first and smartest step in dealing with toxic people is not learning how to answer them. It is learning how not to feed them with the emotional response they are seeking. Most toxic individuals survive on attention. It does not matter whether that attention is positive or negative. They simply need to know they have entered your mind. Some provoke through criticism, others manipulate through guilt. Some create endless drama, while others enjoy subtle disrespect disguised as jokes. Different methods, but the same purpose. They want your emotional investment, because every emotional reaction confirms that they still have influence over you. When you react impulsively, you unknowingly reward the very behavior you wish would stop. This is why emotional discipline is not weakness. It is intelligence. The person who can remain calm while another is trying to create chaos possesses a strength that cannot be measured by physical force. Imagine standing beside a lake early in the morning. The surface is perfectly still, reflecting the sky like a mirror. Throw a stone into it, and ripples appear immediately. Toxic people spend their lives throwing stones into the emotional lakes of others. They expect disturbance because disturbance gives them satisfaction. But imagine a lake so vast that even a stone creates only the smallest ripple pool before disappearing completely. That is the mind you must cultivate. Many people believe silence means defeat. They think that if they do not defend themselves immediately, others will assume they are weak. But silence chosen with awareness is very different from silence born out of fear. One comes from helplessness, while the other comes from mastery. There's tremendous confidence in knowing that not every accusation deserves an explanation, and not every insult deserves a response. The mature mind understands that energy is limited. Every unnecessary argument consumes a portion of your peace that can never be recovered. Consider how often conflicts continue only because both sides keep adding fuel. One harsh sentence is answered with another. One accusation leads to another accusation. Soon, nobody remembers what started the disagreement because both people are now defending their pride instead of seeking understanding. Toxic people understand this cycle instinctively. They know that if they can provoke you into emotional thinking, logical thinking disappears. Anger clouds judgment. Hurt weakens perspective. Fear narrows vision. In that emotional fog, people make decisions they later regret. The greatest mistake is assuming you must always win the conversation. Sometimes winning the conversation means losing your peace. You may have the perfect argument, the strongest evidence, and the clearest explanation, yet leave feeling exhausted, anxious, and emotionally drained. Was that truly victory? Or did the toxic person succeed by consuming hours of your attention and disturbing your inner balance? Wisdom teaches that protecting your peace is often more valuable than protecting your pride. This does not mean ignoring reality or pretending harmful behavior does not exist. It means recognizing the difference between responding intentionally and reacting automatically. A reaction is immediate, emotional, and uncontrolled. A response is deliberate, thoughtful, and guided by principles rather than impulses. Between what happens to you and how you respond lies a small space. Within that space lives your freedom. The more you strengthen that space, the less control toxic people have over your life. Notice how easily emotions become contagious. Walk into a room where everyone is shouting and your heartbeat naturally rises. Spend enough time around bitterness, and you may begin speaking with the same bitterness. Negativity spreads quickly because human beings unconsciously mirror the emotional state of those around them. Toxic individuals rely on this tendency. They want you to become as impatient, resentful, or aggressive as they are. Once you begin behaving like them, you lose the ability to clearly recognize the difference between their character and yours. This is why self-awareness must come before self-defense. The moment you notice your breathing becoming shallow, your voice becoming louder, or your thoughts becoming consumed with proving someone wrong, pause. That pause is not hesitation. It is protection. It prevents another person's emotional state from becoming your own. Instead of allowing anger to take control, observe it. Instead of immediately responding, ask yourself whether the conversation deserves your attention. Sometimes the wisest action is to say less, not because you have nothing to say, but because your peace is worth more than your opinion being accepted. There is also another truth that many overlook. Toxic people often repeat the same patterns with everyone they encounter. They criticize one person today and another tomorrow. They create conflict wherever they go because conflict has become part of their identity. If you take every insult personally, you begin carrying burdens that were never uniquely yours. Their behavior reflects their habits more than your worth. Understanding this allows you to step back emotionally instead of absorbing every negative word as if it defines you. Think about how much energy is wasted replaying conversations long after they have ended. You lie awake imagining better responses, stronger arguments, sharper comebacks. Meanwhile, the other person may already be occupied with someone else. Your mind remains trapped in a battle that no longer exists outside your imagination. Toxic people do not need to continue speaking to control you if you continue speaking to yourself on their behalf. The conversation lives on because you refuse to let it end internally. The disciplined mind recognizes when it is feeding unnecessary thoughts. Every time you replay an insult, you strengthen its hold over you. Every time you imagine revenge, you extend the influence of the person who hurt you. This does not mean suppressing emotions. It means observing them without allowing them to dominate your decisions. Feel the emotion, understand it, and let it pass instead of building a permanent home for it within your mind. Emotional independence develops through consistent practice. Each moment you refuse to react impulsively strengthens your character. Each unnecessary conflict you decline makes your mind more resilient. Each insult you choose not to carry lightens the burden you place upon yourself. Eventually, people begin noticing something unusual about you. Their attempts to provoke no longer produce the expected results. They search for your anger and find calm. They search for your insecurity and find confidence. They search for your fear and discover quiet composure. This transformation is not about becoming cold or indifferent. It is about becoming intentional. Compassion can exist without compliance. Kindness can exist without weakness. Patience can exist without allowing disrespect. You do not have to match another person's emotional state to understand them. In fact, the clearer your own mind becomes, the easier it is to recognize when someone is attempting to manipulate your emotions for their own satisfaction. The smartest way to deal with toxic people begins long before they speak. It begins with the decision that your inner peace will no longer depend on another person's behavior. When that decision becomes part of your character, their words lose much of their power before they ever reach your ears. Many people believe that setting boundaries means becoming distant, harsh, or uncaring. They imagine that protecting themselves requires building walls around their hearts and treating everyone with suspicion. But true boundaries are not walls designed to keep people out. They are doors with locks, allowing you to decide who enters, how long they stay, and what behavior you are willing to accept. The healthiest people are not those who never let anyone close. They are the ones who know where kindness ends and self-respect begins. One of the reasons toxic people become so influential is because they recognize uncertainty. They notice when someone is afraid to say no, uncomfortable with confrontation, or desperate to be liked. They understand that people who constantly seek approval often sacrifice their own needs to avoid disappointing others. This is why many good-hearted individuals become trapped in unhealthy relationships, difficult friendships, or exhausting workplaces. Their compassion is genuine, but it lacks boundaries. Without boundaries, kindness becomes an invitation for exploitation. There is a quiet difference between being generous and allowing yourself to be used. Generosity is a choice made from abundance. Being used happens when that choice is no longer yours. If every conversation leaves you emotionally drained, if every request feels like an obligation instead of an opportunity, or if someone repeatedly ignores your limits, then your kindness is no longer serving both people equally. It has become a resource that others consume without appreciation. Many people fear saying no because they worry it will make them appear selfish. Yet every time you say yes to something that violates your values, your time, or your peace, you are saying no to yourself. Every unnecessary obligation steals attention from the life you are trying to build. Every moment spent satisfying unreasonable demands is a moment taken away from your family, your goals, your health, or your own inner development. Boundaries are not about rejecting others. They are about refusing to abandon yourself. Consider a tree standing in the middle of a forest. It gives shade, produces oxygen, and offers shelter to birds and animals. It serves life continuously without asking for recognition. Yet the tree also has bark. That bark is not a symbol of cruelty, it is protection. Without it, insects, disease, and harsh weather would slowly destroy what makes the tree capable of giving. In the same way, your boundaries are not signs that you care less. They are the protection that allows you to continue caring without becoming exhausted. Toxic people often test boundaries gradually, rather than all at once. They begin with small acts of disrespect. They interrupt your time, they dismiss your opinions, they borrow without returning, they make promises they never intend to keep. They criticize you under the disguise of honesty. Each individual act may seem too minor to confront, but together they form a pattern. The danger lies not in the first violation, but in your willingness to normalize it. What you repeatedly tolerate quietly becomes the standard others believe they can maintain. One of the greatest forms of self-respect is consistency. If you tell someone that certain behavior is unacceptable, your actions must support your words. Empty boundaries are merely wishes. If every consequence disappears because you feel guilty, manipulative people quickly learn that your limits are negotiable. They stop respecting your words because experience has taught them that persistence will eventually wear you down. This does not require anger. In fact, the strongest boundaries are often delivered without emotional intensity. Imagine someone calmly saying, "I am not available for this conversation if you continue speaking to me that way." There is no shouting, no insults, no attempt to humiliate the other person. There is simply clarity. Clarity is powerful because it removes confusion. Toxic individuals often depend upon emotional chaos to blur responsibility. Calmness leaves little room for manipulation. There is also wisdom in understanding that not everyone deserves unlimited access to your life. Modern culture often encourages constant availability. Messages should be answered immediately. Calls should never be ignored. Every invitation should receive consideration. But constant accessibility does not create healthy relationships. It often creates unhealthy expectations. People begin assuming they are entitled to your time simply because you have always made yourself available. Your attention is one of the most valuable resources you possess. Once spent, it cannot be recovered. Toxic people consume attention the way fire consumes wood. No matter how much you provide, they always require more. They seek constant reassurance, endless arguments, repeated explanations, or continuous emotional support without ever taking responsibility for themselves. If you allow every demand to interrupt your priorities, your own life gradually becomes secondary to theirs. Learning to disappoint people is an essential part of emotional maturity. This may sound uncomfortable because many of us were raised to believe that making others happy is always the right thing to do. But it is impossible to live honestly without occasionally disappointing someone. If every decision is made to avoid upsetting others, you will eventually betray your own convictions. The temporary discomfort of someone else's disappointment is often far healthier than the lasting resentment that develops when you continually sacrifice yourself. There is a remarkable peace that comes from accepting that not everyone will understand your boundaries. Some people will call you selfish because they benefited from your lack of boundaries. Others will accuse you of changing because they preferred the version of you that never said no. These reactions reveal more about what they expected from you than about who you actually are. A healthy person may not always like your boundaries, but they will respect your right to have them. Boundaries are especially important because toxic behavior rarely disappears through explanation alone. Many people believe that if they simply communicate more clearly, the other person will finally understand. But manipulation often survives understanding. Some individuals know exactly how their actions affect you. They simply prioritize their own desires over your well-being. Continuing to explain yourself repeatedly to someone committed to ignoring your limits only deepens your frustration. Instead of asking whether someone understands your boundary, ask whether they respect it. Understanding requires awareness. Respect requires choice. A person may fully understand your needs and still deliberately violate them. This is why actions reveal character more clearly than promises. Anyone can apologize. Anyone can promise change. But genuine respect appears in consistent behavior over time. Healthy boundaries also transform your relationship with yourself. Every time you honor your own limits, you reinforce the belief that your well-being matters. Confidence does not appear overnight. It grows through repeated acts of self-respect. Each decision to protect your peace strengthens the trust you have in yourself. Eventually, you stop seeking permission from others to prioritize your mental and emotional health. There is another important truth. Boundaries are not punishments, they are information. They communicate what kind of relationship is possible. If someone chooses to respect them, trust grows naturally. If they repeatedly violate them, distance becomes necessary, not out of hatred, but out of wisdom. Distance is sometimes the healthiest expression of compassion because it prevents resentment from replacing kindness. Notice that calm people rarely spend excessive time announcing their boundaries. They simply live by them. If someone repeatedly crosses the line, they quietly adjust the level of access that person has to their life. They do not seek revenge. They do not organize campaigns to expose the other person. They simply recognize that trust has been reduced by repeated choices, and their behavior reflects that reality. The ability to protect your peace without carrying hatred is one of the highest forms of emotional strength. Hatred keeps you emotionally connected to the very person you wish to escape. It occupies your thoughts, influences your decisions, and silently controls your mood. Boundaries allow separation without bitterness. They allow you to walk away without carrying the weight of revenge. You can wish someone well while deciding they no longer belong in your inner circle. This quiet firmness often confuses toxic people because they expect either submission or emotional conflict. They are prepared for arguments, guilt, and dramatic confrontations. What they rarely expect is calm certainty. A person who knows their values, respects their own limits, and refuses to engage in unnecessary emotional games becomes extremely difficult to manipulate. Their kindness remains intact, but it is guided by wisdom rather than fear, generosity rather than obligation, and compassion rather than the desperate need to be accepted. One of the greatest mistakes people make when dealing with toxic individuals is believing that their peace depends on changing someone else's behavior. They spend months trying to explain, convince, correct, or inspire another person to become more understanding, more respectful, or more compassionate. They hope that one perfect conversation will finally awaken empathy in someone who has shown little interest in practicing it. But the more they chase this outcome, the more frustrated they become. The pursuit itself becomes a source of suffering because it places your emotional well-being in the hands of someone you cannot control. There is a simple truth that many people resist because it feels unfair. You cannot force another human being to grow before they are willing to grow. You cannot make someone value honesty if they benefit from deception. You cannot create humility inside a person who is deeply attached to pride. Growth is an internal decision. Advice may guide it, experience may encourage it, pain may accelerate it, but no amount of effort from another person can replace the willingness that must come from within. This realization is not meant to make you cynical. It is meant to make you free. The moment you stop trying to control another person's character, you recover the energy that was trapped in an impossible task. That energy can now be invested where it has always belonged: your own development. Every hour you spend improving your discipline, strengthening your patience, expanding your wisdom, or deepening your emotional awareness produces lasting results. Every hour spent trying to reshape someone, determined to remain the same, often produces only exhaustion. Many people imagine that self-mastery is something reserved for monks, philosophers, or individuals living in peaceful environments. In reality, self-mastery is tested most intensely in ordinary life. It is tested when someone interrupts you with unnecessary criticism. It is tested when another person spreads false stories about you. It is tested when someone intentionally misunderstands your words or challenges your patience. Anyone can appear calm when life is comfortable. Character reveals itself when comfort disappears. Imagine two people standing in a strong wind. One has deep roots like an ancient tree. The other has shallow roots planted in loose soil. When the storm arrives, both experience the same wind. Yet one remains standing while the other bends with every gust. The difference is not the strength of the storm. It is the strength beneath the surface. Likewise, toxic people are like storms. They reveal the depth of your inner roots. If your emotional stability depends entirely on external circumstances, every difficult person will shake your foundation. But if your stability comes from disciplined self-awareness, their behavior loses much of its ability to disturb you. This is why your attention should remain focused inward rather than outward. Notice how easily the mind becomes obsessed with another person's flaws. You replay their mistakes, you analyze their motives, you discuss their behavior with friends, you wonder why they continue acting the same way. Gradually, your life becomes centered around someone else's shortcomings. Without realizing it, you have given them a permanent place in your thoughts. They continue influencing your day, even when they are nowhere near you. A disciplined mind recognizes this trap. It understands that every minute spent obsessing over another person's character is a minute not invested in your own. Ask yourself a different question. Instead of asking, why are they like this? Ask, what is this situation teaching me? That shift changes everything. Suddenly, the toxic person is no longer your teacher because of their opinions. They become your teacher because they expose the areas where your own emotional discipline still needs strengthening. Perhaps they reveal that you crave approval more than you realized. Perhaps they expose your impatience, your insecurity, or your fear of rejection. These discoveries may feel uncomfortable, but they are valuable. They show you exactly where growth is possible. Without difficult people, many hidden weaknesses would remain invisible. The challenge is not allowing those weaknesses to define you. The challenge is using them as opportunities for self-improvement rather than reasons for self-condemnation. One of the most liberating habits you can develop is refusing to personalize everything. Toxic individuals often criticize, manipulate, or complain regardless of who stands before them. Their behavior follows them from relationship to relationship because it originates within themselves. If you assume every negative interaction is a reflection of your worth, you carry responsibilities that were never yours. A person's inability to communicate respectfully often reflects their emotional habits, not your value as a human being. Self-mastery also means becoming comfortable with misunderstanding. Many people waste enormous amounts of energy trying to make sure everyone sees them correctly. They explain every decision, defend every action, and correct every false assumption. But no explanation can control another person's interpretation. Some people are committed to misunderstanding because it serves their narrative. Others simply lack the willingness to see beyond their own perspective. Chasing universal approval becomes an endless race with no finish line. There is remarkable peace in accepting that your responsibility is to act with integrity, not to control opinions. Integrity means your actions remain consistent with your values, even when nobody applauds them. It means speaking honestly without becoming cruel, remaining respectful without becoming passive, and protecting your peace without seeking revenge. When your identity depends upon your principles instead of other people's approval, manipulation loses much of its effectiveness. Think about the strongest individuals you have ever met. Rarely are they the loudest people in the room. Rarely do they spend their time proving themselves. Their confidence comes from an internal foundation. They know who they are regardless of praise or criticism. Because of this, they do not feel compelled to react to every opinion that crosses their path. They understand that every argument they avoid creates more space for meaningful work, deeper relationships, and inner calm. Self-mastery requires constant observation of your own mind. Notice the thoughts that appear after difficult interactions. Do they encourage resentment? Do they invite revenge? Do they replay conversations repeatedly? The mind naturally produces thoughts, but wisdom lies in choosing which thoughts deserve your attention. Not every thought deserves belief. Not every emotion deserves action. The ability to observe your inner world without immediately obeying it is one of the highest forms of freedom. This practice becomes especially important when dealing with repeated negativity. Toxic people often attempt to define your identity through repeated labels. They may call you weak, selfish, incapable, or insensitive. If these labels enter your mind often enough, you may begin questioning yourself. This is why self-knowledge is essential. When you know your values through consistent action, the opinions of others become information rather than identity. You listen when criticism contains truth. You release it when it exists only to wound. Another important aspect of self-mastery is accepting that peace is a daily discipline rather than a permanent achievement. There will still be moments when anger arises. There will still be situations that test your patience. The goal is not emotional perfection. The goal is increasing awareness. Each time you recognize your emotions before they control your behavior, you strengthen your ability to remain centered. Progress happens through repetition, not through a single breakthrough. As your inner discipline grows, your relationships begin to change naturally. Some toxic individuals lose interest because they no longer receive the emotional reactions they once enjoyed. Others continue their behavior, but their influence over your life steadily diminishes. You stop measuring your happiness according to their moods. You stop allowing their approval to determine your confidence. You stop believing that every conflict requires your participation. Eventually, you reach a place where your energy is no longer spent trying to repair people who refuse responsibility for themselves. Instead, it is invested in becoming someone whose peace cannot be easily stolen, whose values cannot be easily compromised, and whose character remains steady regardless of the behavior of those around them. The greatest victory over toxic people is never proving them wrong. It is becoming so grounded in your own discipline that their chaos no longer finds a home within your mind.